currently continuing a conversation with Mr. Jeffrey Wick, who is the author of Public Education, and so fits our program, so I wanted a little more time with him. And on the last program, we talked about just kind of some general things, but I think I'd like to get to the nuts and the bolts of how to really change things. And so I want to bring up to you, Jeffrey, the parents. I have a son-in-law who's a public school teacher, and I consider him, he's the most wonderful man. I consider him a missionary. And he does have the fruit of the Holy Spirit and that kindness and gentleness, which a lot of these kids need.
That's true.
But to try to get a parent to a teacher-parent meeting, it's kind of like looking for hen's teeth, I think.
Well, turnout is usually low. And I think part
of that...
Is that
an understatement?
That's an understatement. Yeah. Yes, it is. And I think part of that comes from the dependent mentality. You know, and in my book, I discuss how over time, over decades, the school system has assumed more authority, sometimes trying to be benevolent, sometimes trying to help out. But as the school assumed more, the parents gave less. So the schools are saying, okay, now we're going to offer this service. And parents are saying, well, the school's going to take care of my child. And over time, the school becomes dominant and kind of replaces the parent. And the parent's saying, here, the school will take care of my child. I'm just going to back out and turn it over.
Yeah, they compartmentalize. Okay, I have the kid at home, but you have the kid at school, right. And that's your problem.
Right, and I think over time, over that 40 years or 50 years, as that dependent mentality sets in, you can't get rid of it. So you have a child who started school at age 5 or earlier, graduates at 17 or 18, maybe goes to college till 21. So for 16 years or more, they've been indoctrinated that the school will take care of me. So they transfer that to the government. So the dependency grows through time, with the public school system being part of the reason for that. Not the only reason, but part of it.
Well, there's a saying that the squeaky wheel gets the grease.
True.
If parents banded together and said, we don't like this going on in the school, how much influence would that have?
Probably depends on the community you're in. I mean, it would take a lot of people to stand up and say enough's enough. I want to teach creation in my child's school. I don't want evolution being emphasized, or environmentalism, or moral relativism, or sex education, or whatever the issue is. I think parents have to jump in and take charge. And I hear a story, well, I see it in my own school. You know, we teach what's called family life at the elementary level, which is pretty basic. But parents can opt out of that if they don't like it. So out of 350 kids, I might have 4 or 5 who opt out.
Why would they opt out?
Because they disagree with, you know, what's necessarily being taught to the kids in there. You know, maybe the sex ed part goes a little bit too far. In my school, we're pretty conservative. We don't go over the top. But some schools, they don't hold back. I mean, they're going all out with the homosexuality and the promiscuity and all that stuff, the abortion, everything. And I had a guy tell me in his school, his daughter was a teenager. And out of 2,000 students, he's the only one who opted his child out. And now he's saying in California, you can't even do that anymore. The school insists that the children participate in that type of instruction.
How much power does a principal have, like yourself?
Depends on the issue. You know, some of the stuff is state mandated. We teach family life because we have to. Now there's some flexibility. We can pick certain parts we want to teach and leave certain parts out. So it just depends on the issue.
Okay, and what about teachers that might be mandated to teach something that's, I mean, I do consider our Christian teachers in our public schools, and I know they're not all the same, but I know some of the, in the inner cities, so forth, some of the teachers, it's survival.
Right.
There's not a whole lot of education that goes on, and I've just heard a lot, you know, really firsthand.
Right, and there's not a lot of flexibility. Usually there's a state-mandated curriculum that those teachers are teaching, and they must follow.
I think I'm the kind that would tweak it a little bit.
Tweak it a little bit, and you can. Like, just so you don't take too much time tweaking it, because you got to get a certain curriculum in, because then there's testing at the end of the year. So you got to be careful. But you know, for me, when I taught U.S. history, I taught our Christian history when it was applicable. You know, if I talked about the Mayflower Compact, for example, the curriculum stated in the textbook that it was basically set up basic government and majority rule. That's it. Doesn't mention the quotes about dedicating their colony to Christ and to God.
But you
I
put
that in because it's part of history. You know, I didn't spend a day on it, but I made sure that my students knew what was in that Mayflower Compact. So that's revisionism history.
I think I just had a twinge of discouragement because I talked about the principal, the teachers, and the parents, and I don't see a lot of power in any of those entities.
Well, there's not a lot of power, and I think when states sign on to the Common Core, like we talked about before, you lose even more control to the federal government. Because once the federal government starts writing the social studies curriculum, it's going to start with math and reading. I'll guarantee you that will expand to social studies and science. They're going to put in American history, whatever they want. And unless you're someone who studies independently and whatnot as a teacher, you're not going to be able to add in because a lot of the kids coming out of colleges aren't getting it.
Well, I've heard a lot of them leave high school that can't really read an employment application.
Well, you definitely have some of that. I mean, there's some students who put in very minimal effort and whatnot, and the math skills are low for some kids. I mean, there's some good achievement. There's some kids working hard, and they're doing some good things. But
do you know what I've noticed when I go through the newspaper and they have all the valedictorians and the salutatorians and so forth? A lot of them are Asian young people, and they seem to value education.
And to me, that
I think a little bit more than, probably quite a bit more than the average American. That comes from the home.
And to me, I think that comes back down to the discipline and the structure. Here's the expectation. Truly high expectations.
Yes.
That's another thing we need to get back to. We talk about it, but I don't think we implement it at all. We always make excuses because we want the child to feel good and to be comfortable and all those things. But if you go to Asian cultures and even some European cultures, here's the deal. You're gonna reach this or not. We're not going to hold your hand and babysit you, and you're going to dedicate yourself to academics. And that's probably why you see that. Those households are dedicated.
I remember having a mother on who lived around here. She was from India, and her daughters were going to be doctors. That's just what it was. There was no TV in the house. There was that structure and all, and I have no doubt that those girls really achieved
because of that.
Probably in more than education.
Well, in this country, teachers will get upset, especially if they're in a union state, if the classroom sizes are too big. Well, I got 28 kids, that's too many, and it's hard to control, and I can't give them all this one-on-one attention and whatnot. But if you go to some Asian nations, I had a lady who cut my hair who was from South Korea. They had classrooms with 70 kids in it.
Really?
One teacher.
One teacher.
And you could hear a pin drop. This is her telling me the story. You could hear a pin drop in there. Because
wow.
The kids were focused. It was discipline and structure. There's no excuse. You're not going to go there and goof off. You're not going to have an excuse for failing. You're going to pay attention and get the work done.
Well, our schools and school districts, aren't they terrified of a lawsuit? I've observed the most foolish things because they were afraid of a lawsuit.
I don't know that as a principal of a school, I wouldn't say I'm terrified of a lawsuit. I'm just saying the philosophy.
What about your superintendent?
I wouldn't say so, but the philosophy has become
right
where if you're not making kids feel good, which is sometimes called effective learning, and you're not entertaining them, and you're not considering their unique difference or whatever the case may be, that you're not going to help that child. So a lot of people have bought in to this philosophy. It's not that they're afraid of a lawsuit. It's essentially they've bought into weakness. And
oh, absolutely.
And again, I talk about in my book how weakness is promoted in the public school system. So the key is this philosophy. Kick out that philosophy, go back to some of the things we talked about, and I think you can turn the system around.
Well, and also you have to change every single thing because one child is offended.
Exactly.
You know what my mother would have said to me about being offended? Get over it.
Deal with it.
Yeah,
right.
yeah. I'm talking with Jeffrey Wick, and so qualified to really write this book. And let's get that website up, and we'll leave it up for the rest of our time together. You say that, many say that religion has been taken out of school, but you say it's promoted.
It is promoted because, again, the separation of church and state ideal, it's a fantasy. You cannot have it. They've taken out Christianity, but now they've inserted the other faith, which is, to me, environmentalism, relativism, and self. They raise up those three things. Moral relativism. Every behavior is equal to any other behavior, regardless of whether it's deviant. We don't hear that term anymore. So relativism, we talked about environmentalism a little bit. And self. You are the center of your own universe. God is not, you don't need God. All you need is you.
Can you sing Christmas carols in your school?
We do. Fortunately, I'm probably one of the small number of schools that do at our Christmas concert, which we still call Christmas. We still call it Christmas break, where I am. But it's a mix. You know, we do maybe a Christmas carol, maybe a couple secular. I'd say the secular ones outweigh in number the Christmas carols.
Yeah. Also, we're hearing a lot about really kind of encroachment of Islam in a lot of areas in the United States today, and all you have to do is look, I think, at Germany and London. It won't be too many decades before they are in the majority, because I believe Great Britain is at 0 population growth. And we're getting there. So I understand that now that it's 2 citizens who work for 1 Social Security check in this nation. That's scary, friends. That was really, really scary. And so it all goes down to abortion and not having larger families. Have you experienced anything with this Islam becoming pretty prominent?
No, not in my area. I mean, I don't see that. I'm in a pretty rural area, so we don't have a lot of pressure in that regard. However, what I've read recently is the textbooks that are coming out now are revising 9/11.
Oh,
Instead of saying, you know, terrorists attacked America, it's like stuff along the lines of misunderstood youth, and however they're twisting it. So I think if you have a parent in schools and they're in U.S. history class, I would look at that book and see what they're teaching about 9/11.
That's like the people who say there was no Holocaust.
Exactly. It's like we're afraid to offend anybody by telling the truth, but I mean, we just got to tell it the way it happened.
I agree with Franklin Graham. It wasn't Presbyterians who knocked those buildings down.
I agree with that as well. Absolutely not.
Okay, you say that the U.S. And ancient Israel have similar destinies.
I do.
Explain.
In my last chapter, it's entitled The Pending Judgment on America. That's not the exact title, but it's basically about America facing God's judgment. And I talk about how Israel started with 12 tribes, which received land, and then the Levites, which was 13. And then Jesus and 12 disciples was 13, and we started with 13 colonies. So I go through a number of parallels between the U.S. and ancient Israel. And Israel was God's chosen people and still is. It's his chosen land. And he had a covenant with them. And he blessed them. And then they revolted. And then they were punished. And I think America is God's second chosen nation, the purpose of which is to spread the gospel of Jesus Christ to the world. And I believe he selected America for that purpose. We were founded as a Christian nation. There are hundreds of quotes from the founders showing that. And I think we're following that same track that Israel followed, from blessing to rebellion to eventual punishment. And as Israel was punished a couple thousand years ago, I think America is on the same precipice of looking at God's punishment unless we return to God's ways, to the Bible.
Interesting parallel. Well, a while ago I opined about the teachers, the parents, and principal. It just dawned on me, who could change it? It's the students.
That's a good point. The students could change it. I think it takes everybody, really.
Yeah, but I've always said peer pressure is just peer pressure.
True.
It can be good, it can be bad.
True.
What if we raised up from our churches strong, onward Christian soldier type of young people? They could change.
You raise a very good point, because at the reform school I worked at, which was a completely different environment, and the reason it was successful were some of the reasons I told you: structure and discipline, and giving those kids confidence that they could achieve. But a key premise of that system was peer pressure. The students who behaved properly, when new students came into the system, they modeled that to those other students. And if those students wanted to rebel, it was the other students who confronted them first. Like, you will not spit on the sidewalk, for example. And the peer pressure allowed that school, positive peer pressure allowed that school to succeed. Absolutely, you're right.
If churches would get the standard up, parents, Christian parents, and raise up young people who are not ashamed of the gospel of the Lord Jesus Christ, not ashamed of it, there's nothing the school system can do to them.
You're correct. You're correct. And I think our prosperity as a nation kind of led to complacency, which allowed this evil socialistic bent to get in and kind of take over. You know, we kind of thought we all have our homes and our cars and we're living fine and we're healthy and we eat good and we have all these things. But underneath the surface, this dangerous ideology was taken over. And I think what you said there would go a long way to reverse it.
Yeah, that would be a major inroad.
Oh, yeah.
Right there.
Absolutely.
And that's the kind of young people that we need to be raising up in our homes and in our churches.
Absolutely.
That they would take that message and not be intimidated.
And people have to realize when they go to the school, they're not getting the Christian message.
No.
They're not getting those values that they're getting at home. So you got to be ready to be aware of what's happening there so your child can be strong.
Well, they've got to raise them strong enough to withstand. And see, with kids, if it's the popular thing to be good and be a Christian, that's what they'll do.
That's true. Well, there was a time
they're
when
easily influenced.
Absolutely, very easily. And I think there was a time when the school's principles matched the family's principles.
Yeah.
A family could send their child to school and be comfortable. That's not the case anymore. If you're raising a Christian child and they're going to school, they're not getting anything. As a matter of fact,
and they're not getting any affirmation.
Exactly. Anything they're getting is criticizing the way they're being raised.
So we need to increase the numbers.
Absolutely.
That would work.
That would work.
Oh, I've loved talking to you.
Same here. It was a pleasure.
That is my heartbeat, because it's not rocket science. It really is. It's not difficult at all. That the Christian voice just needs to be a whole lot stronger and don't back up.
Let's be confident and proclaim it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Excellent. Come and see me next time you're in Tampa Bay area.
I'd love to.
And you stay with me. I have a couple things to say before we have to say goodbye.
Artheline would like you to keep the following information handy. You may contact Homekeepers by writing P.O. Box 6922, Clearwater, Florida 33758, or go to www.rippy.org. Remember, we always enjoy hearing from our viewers, and we thank you for your support.